Hey there, welcome back. I guess I was gone last week. I was sick, had some kind of flu. It wasn't the COVID, definitely the flu. So this week I'm going to try to follow along using the old janky Facebook app that keeps closing on me. See how this works. So then I don't have a tragedy where I can't talk to y'all because I really like to actually interact. Um, oh, look at that. Okay, so I got to turn this down. Oh, this is gonna be weird, people. This is very meta, very meta. So we'll see how this goes. I'm gonna turn this media down so we don't get some weird echo. Play that. I can see the comments. Okay. Of course, now the comments are working fine. Fantastic. Hi, guys. Um, let's see. I don't know what I said I'd talk about tonight. I think I said we're going to talk about bugs and history. And what else did I say we were going to talk about? I don't know. Something else. Um, so, uh, yeah. What's going on, everyone? Um, I guess I wanted to talk about, lights. Lights. We're going to talk about lights. Um, I think that the lights are the most important part of your garden, and you're going to suffer if you don't have enough light. But I think one of the things that we need to talk about is the fact that too much light is not good. And I wanted this all to be more of a we kind of need to talk about parameters, cannabis. Um, so there's always a limiting factor in anything that's alive, like anything that's growing, anything that's living. There's going to be a limiting factor, and that's something you have to remember when you're growing cannabis, because essentially you're going to have um, you know not everything's optimal, and so more often than not, people don't want to spend a lot of money on lights, and it's understandable. People aren't made of money, um, but that's often one of the big limiting factors, along with CO2. Fresh air is the very beginning, but even more than fresh air, CO2 in general is kind of one of those things that we generally don't feed cannabis enough. It's just like potassium. It's something cannabis just gobbles up: light, CO2, potassium. Um, so that's something. So you can buy the best light in the world, and you can put as much light as you want on the plants, but you'll just fry them unless your CO2, your humidity, your environment is all ramped up and moving along with that. If you have the right CO2, the right humidity, the right lights, but you don't have the right nutrition, then you're going to see rapid nutrient deficiencies in your cannabis. So that is so I've been looking a lot at lights, and I don't know that a home grower can do any better than a spider farmer, which are quantum boards, which they contain Samsung LEDs. They're just a flat board. The farmer, I think it's 4,000. They call it. Maybe it's 400. I think it's 4,000. Has four panels. It has a dimmer, and it's like under $600. That will light a 5 by 5 space clearly. And so I think that if you can spend $500, I mean, it's not easy to spend that kind of money, but this is the kind of thing that lasts years. Say it lasts 5 years. You spend $100 a year on your light. That's nothing, especially if you're getting 5, 6 crops a year out of it. Then you're down to $20 a crop on your light. You got to kind of think in the long term with your lights. You don't want to skimp. I've seen a lot of people using inexpensive LEDs, and then they wonder why they have low yields. They wonder why their quality isn't where they want it to be. And I'm not saying that the Spider Farmer is the best light out there. I mean, they get a lot more expensive and they get a lot more trick than that. But if you have it lights a 5 by 5 area. probably get away with 6x6 because most people that light 5x5 areas with it turn it down. Again, I don't get paid by any of these guys. I just really just look at this stuff and I'm actually looking at a light for myself, believe it or not, for a basement grow of all of my regular ass plants that are outside on my patio because Kansas just murders cool plants, and that's not cool, man. And so in the winter, I will have a grow in my basement that is absolutely houseplants because I live in Topeka, Kansas, and I'm too old for taking the risk, honestly. So I've been looking at lights too, and I'm just like, how much do I want to spend on, lighting, and what am I going to do? And I'm not sure I can do better than four quantum panels with a dimmer switch on them. I could get um, a ceramic metal halide. I've been thinking about that. A couple of those would be around the same price, around $500 for a couple decent ones. They produce a ton of light of heat, which wouldn't be so bad because they'd be in my basement. But um, I'm kind of thinking later on when I get my medical either in Kansas or if I move to another state or whatever, I would like a light that would be decent for growing herbs. So that's just my opinion. I've been looking at it. Comparable lights are 800 to $1,200 that are LEDs, and that one is just it's a really good price point. So um, but I want you all to consider the idea that there's always limiting factors, and you need to be thinking holistically about your grow. Don't get too, you know, so say you have a perfect environment, perfect lights, perfect CO2, perfect everything, and then what about your strains? What are you growing? Who are you getting your seeds from? How is that working for you? That's something that I think people really, really need to pay attention to because uh, it's just it's foundational. It's like location, location, location joke about real estate. It's genetics, genetics, genetics. Like good genetics grow good herb, and all the rest of the things that you can do that relate to it um, are secondary, really, to the fact that genetics are important, and so they're not cheap. A good pack of seeds is about $100, and that's for somewhere between 10 and 20 seeds. But it actually is crazy cheap if you think about that. That's $5 to $10 a seed, and that's not very much because one of those seeds is probably going to be pretty good. Again, we have to think about this. You're like, I don't have any money, I can't grow. Well, you are going to be buying herb, and you're going to be buying it for a lot more than you can grow it for over time. So I don't know what you can do. I know right now is a really bad time for money, um, but you know the amount of money you spend up front on smart purchases, buying a little higher quality, buying better genetics and such things pays off in the long run. And the long run is what you want to be looking at unless you just absolutely can't. So again, I'm going to plug Dynasty Genetics on that level. Genetics, Relic Seeds, Professor P, one of the realest people in the game. I'm wearing the shirt. I will rep this guy all day long. He's never. I think he gave me this shirt. I think he gave me a couple T-shirts because I went to some of his events or whatever. But that's all he's ever done. He doesn't. He doesn't give me anything to rep him, but he is absolutely. Uh, he's been in it for patients forever. Believe it or not, he is active in the autism community, providing medicine. He has he's just as good as it gets. So $100 for I think it's 12 seeds, 10 seeds, 12 seeds of Dynasty Genetics. That's silly cheap. That's nothing. So uh, I would say that if you have a choice right now of who to buy from, I would suggest you buy from Dynasty Genetics if you can get them. Relic Seeds is another one of his. Along the same lines, Bodhi, which is Plant More Seeds. This guy has spent time within ashrams and stuff up in the hills in India, with the people who are covered with ashes and white because that's their religion. They're crazy dreadlocks, like the original dreadlocks and everything. The people who have been smoking big cone chillums of the hash plant for years, and he spent a bunch of time up there. He brings seeds back, he breeds those. He really brings that special stuff. But the thing about Dynasty and Bodie, Plant More Seeds, is that they're just not all that hype. They're not trying to chase that hype train. They're not on the new. They're not wearing Supreme belts, you know. And so that to me makes me like them more. So I'd rep those guys all day if I could, and I am. So Plant More Seeds is Bodie's company. Dynasty Genetics, Relic Seeds. Um, Check those out. Give them a try, and if I'm wrong, tell me. But I think that if you go with quality and you go with people who have good ethics, and unlike some people who name their companies with names similar to ethics, um, go with the people who are really real and who have been around and who have done the work and who aren't trying to get rich or chase the hype. And I think you'll be happy with what you come up with. So you can DM me if you want more information about ordering from these guys. I know some places you can get them. Again, I get nothing for this, but the satisfaction of knowing that some of you are actually going to take my advice possibly and see what I mean and see some real quality products from real quality people. So that's my little rant ish. Wow, my of course the comments are tracking, so that's good. Um, bugs are always at the periphery. Um, Someone posted in Missouri Cannabis Network like a grinder that was covered with spider mites, and everyone's grossing out. And man, I just realized I'm completely desensitized to spider mites. I have to admit, one time I was scoping, and I was using kind of a powerful scope, and spider mites are not that small. They're mites, but you can see them with your naked eye. And I caught a spider mite right in the face, and it was eating, and it's like some kind of shrimp creature. It was creepy, and that I kind of jumped a little, But to be honest, spider mites don't freak me out. I'm not scared of them. I'm not grossed out by them. Uh, really. I've seen crops completely destroyed by them. I've seen them tented up. I've had to clean up crops from that. I've at working as a job. I've had to do what I can to mitigate them, and they're just little bugs. Like whatever. Like we have little bugs all over us. Spider mites you can see. I'm more freaked out by broad mites. Russet mites are pretty bad too, but broad mites, man, if a broadmite female enters an environment and there are no males, the broadmite female will produce only male offspring so she can mate with those until sufficient population balance is reached. So it takes one female broadmite to infect a crop. That freaks me out. That's worse. And broadmites are small and they're fast. They're pretty terrible. Um, and you get them from trading clones. You get them from um, trading clones. You get them, so you always have to quarantine your clones if you ever get them from anyone else. If you ever trade or buy, I don't know what they're going to do with the Missouri dispensaries and how you're going to be able to buy clones and such. But that's something that you're going to want to be extremely careful with. And if you buy a clone from a dispensary, it needs to go in its own place for like 2 weeks, like nowhere near your other plants and another house, another part of the house. And I know that's very difficult with the Missouri um, restrictions on what your grow is and everything, but I guess you just have to get creative because you need to make sure that you quarantine any plants that you get from someone else for long enough to understand if they have some kind of infection or not. Because otherwise, you end up where everyone was a few years ago in Oregon, where a lot of people are in California, where you're just trading russet mites around, you're just trading broad mites around, and they look like deficiencies before they get too bad. They look like a little bit of a sickness, it's just not really happy. I need to feed it a little better. No, those are broad mites. You just gave them to everyone. The herpes of the plant world. So quarantining is super important. Having a plan for quarantining if you ever plan. I don't, and again, I don't know how the regulations are going to change. I'm just talking about what happens in the states where, you can go in Oregon, you can just walk into a dispensary and buy a clone. And that's great. But if you don't quarantine it, you're just asking for trouble. And I've been through some of that trouble in Oregon doing just that. I sprayed it. It's cool. No, no, it's not cool. So that's that part. Um, what other what? So never ever 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 mix sulfur and oil. Way to mitigate insects because insects can't get resistance to oil. They can't get resistance to suffocation. So unlike some of the poisons, um, spinosad, or some of the plant therapy, green cleaner, all those, you're still going to have some plants that have a certain amount of resistance to those. There's no resistance to being suffocated in oil. It's just being suffocated. So oil like Suff Oil X or Organicide is a strong oil component. It's a very good way to mitigate insects. On the other side of the spectrum, sulfur is a really amazing way to deal with these really pesky broad mites, russet mites. I'm pretty sure it'll mess spider mites up too, but if you're using sulfur, you're just trying too hard. Spider mites are actually pretty easy to mitigate. Raise your humidity above 60%, spray them down with water regularly, clean everything up, make sure there's no dirt sitting around, make sure everything, if you have a clean environment, a reasonable amount of humidity, and anytime you see any leaves that have spider mites on them, remove those leaves and immediately put those into something like a water bath so that the spider mites can't just run, throw them in a trash can. The spider mites are just going to run up the side of the trash can and get jiggy with whatever's near there. So that's not going to do it. But spider mites, in the scheme of troublesome predators, this is probably why they don't freak me out. I mean, pests, they probably don't freak me out too much because they're kind of easy to handle. Their damage is really obvious. They're a large mite, you know, easy peasy compared to some of these other situations. So sulfur is really good wettable sulfur that you can spray on your plants. I don't necessarily recommend sulfur burners. They're good for in between crops for making sure that you don't have anyone hanging out waiting for the next crop. But sulfur burners are a little extreme. Usually not. You do not want to breathe sulfur. Even the nice thing about the wettable powder is you can put it in the water and spray it, and it doesn't turn into a dust. But if it gets really severe, you can just dust your plants with sulfur. So the issue, though, is that if you use sulfur and oil at the same time, you're going to get crazy burns. I think it's sulfuric acid. I might be wrong about that, but I think that's what's created when you combine sulfur and oil, or sulfuric acid compounds, something like that. It burns the hell out of your plants, much more damage than the bugs would have done. So make sure if you've chosen to use an oil, you're not going to get to use any kind of sulfur product, and if you've chosen to use a sulfur product, you're not going to get to use any oils. Just do not combine those. I saw someone on one of the pages I followed today suggesting two different products, and one was a sulfur product and one was an oil product, and I said, that is a recipe for disaster. That's exactly what it is. You might as well just spray your plants with bleach. Just 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 go for it. If you're that desperate, I just don't do it. Don't do it. I Now that I know what I know, I'm going with horticultural oils, Suff Oil X. The problem with Suff Oil X is that I think they only sell it in a gallon or 2 gallons at a time, and you don't need that much. I mean, it's a lot. It's like a commercial farm sort of amount. So it wouldn't be the worst idea for you and 3 friends that are growing to get together and buy the smallest amount of Suff Oil X you can and split it 4 ways, because I think it's $85 for a gallon or whatever it is. But if you're serious about mitigating your any kind of pest pressure, it also the nice thing about horticultural oil, and I think sulfur too, is they have the same effect with molds and funguses. So all this relates to integrated pest management, which is IPM, which is you don't wait until you see evidence of bugs to start doing something about bugs. There should be some kind of program on a schedule that you have to mitigate these things. And even thoroughly spraying your plants down with water every 3 days is an IPM program. It's something. And that will keep the spider mites away generally. Spider mites hate water, they just hate it. Um, oh, okay. Spinosad. Spinosad is pyrethrins, I believe, which are spinosad is effective, but that's a banned substance in recreational and in the places where they test medical. Pyrethrins, I believe. You know what? Before I just say that, I'm going to do this thing where I type, and it's weird, but you're right there. So um, I'm gonna I'm gonna be sure. Oh no, no, no. Okay, spinosad is a mixture of two chemicals called spinosyn A and spinosyn D. Um, yeah, that's what it is. Garden insect spray from Monterey. Um, but spinosad is a banned substance when it comes to commercial. You can't have pyrethrins either. Um, but yeah, it's pretty effective, but I don't think you want it. I think it leaves a residue. I think that's really the real issue is that you don't want the residue that it comes with. So if you're in veg and you get some kind of nasty bug and you want to use spinosad and then some kind of oil, like say organicide because it's available, it's easily available, and then you're going to rotate in pyrethrins in veg. This isn't, it's not the best, but man, that little combination 1 2 3 punch right there will kill some bugs. If you're growing commercially, you can't use those things. You have to get a lot more tricky, and that's where using something like Suff Oil X heavily works really well early. Problem with the horticultural oils is that if you have trichomes, external metabolites present on your plant, there's always the problem that either the trichomes will dissolve into the oil or the oil will dissolve into the trichomes. That whole contamination through the same thing that neem oil, you have to worry about if you have trichomes, or which are your external metabolites present, and you use an oil like neem oil, especially an oil that has a bunch of volatile organic chemicals like neem oil does. You smell neem oil, it's um, uh, you got to be concerned. Well, it's definitely organic, and I know it's a bacterial. I'm just saying, I'm pretty sure that spinosad is a banned substance because of the residue that leaves. Stephen, um, top of the soil. I mean, probably soil is a better place for spinosad. I think the problem is the residue. The spinosad gets into the buds, but man, I need to look into it a little more. I know that it's problematic to problematic to the people who grow commercially. So um, a lot of these organic things, pyrethrins, I think are organic, and it's got chrysanthemum or some kind of derivative. But they accumulate and or turn into something weird when you burn them. So you just want to be real careful if you're anywhere near flowering. It's kind of like food. You don't want to put sprays on your food close to. I see all these things that are like safe up to the day of harvest. I'm like, the fuck it is. No, I'm not. I'm not doing it up to the day of harvest. Like, and what kind of bug pressure do you have that you have to be spraying things the day before you harvest it? That's not a good plan. Doesn't seem safe. It doesn't seem prudent. So, but integrated pest management, in my mind, also includes keeping your area clean, keeping your floor swept, keeping your if you have a big tray, it shouldn't have a bunch of mud in it. It shouldn't have a bunch of dirt. There shouldn't be dirt. You shouldn't have if you're not reusing pots, you shouldn't have last crop stacked up in the corner because you haven't gotten to it yet. These are all these sort of things. You don't want you just want your area to be discreet and clean and crisp, and don't give bugs a place to live. Another thing that I think maybe it's another thing that Stephen just asked me another question about pyrethrum and chrysanthemum. I think, I don't know, I'm not 100% sure, but um, integrated pest management, another part of that is a certain amount of thinning of the plant around the inside of the plant, around the stem, around the lower. Your plant comes up out of the soil, and uh, you're going to get those little small branches, small leafy stuff towards the bottom. And, some varieties are really bad about it. There's just a bunch of leaf on the stem. Absolutely remove all of that, every single bit of it. There should be no leaf touching your stem, like your main stem. Yeah, all those little spots of leaf, all those, everything, that's where the bugs, essentially those are like way camps. So that's the way that they make it from the soil up your stem to the first little thing of leaves. They get a little food, then they make it to the second thing of leaves, get a little food, and pretty soon they're in your canopy and you're done. So part of integrated pest management in my mind is it's not really, it's a thinning of the interior of the plant. And in my mind, you've got about 4 to 6 inches of a cone running up the entire inside of the plant where there is no plant material at all except for stems. And if you've got leaf in there, if you've got bud in there, if you've got any of that, that is just asking for bugs. So integrated pest management is, some people have a very specific definition of it. In my definition is the things you do to keep bugs off your plants. And so keeping clean, keeping your plants cleaned out, spraying them with water, even vacuuming regularly around your plants, not letting your cat into your grow room, generally not letting your dog into your grow room if your dog goes out and plays a lot. I mean, that's how a lot of times how spider mites get in. They hitch rides on things. Thrips. Uh, Thrips are weird because thrips are a vector because they pierce the stem in order to lay eggs, and then that's where funguses get in. I've seen pictures of a russet mite hitching a ride on a whitefly. It's just, the cleaner your area is, the less chance you're going to have to deal with this stuff. And if you make it a regular thing that you just do, every Monday you vacuum, every Tuesday you spray them down, every Friday you spray them down again. And I'm not talking about using a bunch of, you can use Dr. Bronner's soap, and especially on the floor, on the outsides of the pots, on your walls, all that. Use the peppermint soap, use the lavender soap. Wash your stuff down. If you have an indoor environment, it's not the outdoors. Dirt is not good. Dirt is great in the pot. I'm going to run living soil, but I'm going to make sure that the rest of the situation is clean as much as possible. So, just some things to think about. Maybe study up on integrated pest management yourself if you want to see. You're going to see that different people have different ideas of exactly what it means. To me, it also means that essentially, as soon as you start flowering, I start adding predator mites. I use nematodes and predator mites in the soil far before flowering. But once I get to flowering, I'm going to stop spraying my plants and I'm going to use bugs to control the other bugs. And, like those spider mites didn't bug me, and it certainly doesn't bug me if there's a few predator mites running around in my buds. I don't care if I smoke them. I've seen so much damage and destruction happen to crops from pests that I am okay with a few random predators running around in my buds. That's just the bottom line. If you get too much of I need everything to be pristine, then you have an open, a carte blanche for when a pest does come along. If it's just like this wonderland where there's nothing slowing them down. And if, say, like pyrethrins, here's the problem with those. There are completely pyrethrin resistant spider mites. So you're using, because pyrethrins have always been the most easily available, readily available organic spray that you can have. And so you get you get it from Home Depot or whatever, and you spray your plants, and it kills 99% of the spider mites, but the 1% that lived because they have a genetic resistance, and now they're reproducing. And you do that enough generations in a row, and they don't even notice it. They don't even care about that stuff. In fact, the water that's carrying the pyrethrins is going to do more to knock back the spider mite populations than the poison itself, because it's like pyrethrins are also used on head lice, right? It's the same thing because it's considered natural or whatever. And if you've had young kids and gone to a hippie school like my kids did, man, it's a problem. They barely notice that stuff. I think they drink it to get high or something. It's a problem. So make sure that you are doing something regularly to mitigate pests before you see them. But the other part is, I've over and over I've said that you need to get used to looking at your plants and noticing things. Like the plant should grow, and you should notice that. If the stem changes color, you should notice it. If the leaf structure changes, you should notice this. If the way the plant holds itself changes, you should notice this. Just your eyes are your first line of defense against all of this, because the plants will tell you when something is going weird. And so make sure you're spending a lot of time looking at your plants, and you're not second guessing yourself saying, no, that's probably all right. It's probably not all right if something changes. It's either a nutrient deficiency, it's too much light, it's too little light, it's too much moisture, it's too little moisture. There's a million reasons why your plants are going to react. And although that's daunting when you're new to this whole thing, as you get better at it, you can become much more confident with it. And you look at them and you go, there's only 3 reasons that they would look like that. And I'm really fearing the third reason. So I'm gonna try to see what I can do about that before it gets out of hand. So um, make sure you're scouting your plants, you're looking at your plants. Also part of integrated pest management, probably the most important part, is that you're paying attention to your plants. But also feeding, also hermaphrodites. I mean, if you're a lot of the seed people that I see being advertised and being talked about and being hyped up in Missouri, I'm like, I wouldn't grow their weed, like, just because. How tested is it? How thoroughly tested? A lot of these people I paid attention. I don't see them talking about stress testing. I don't see them talking about using known growers for testing their strains. I don't see them talking about that. And if they're not talking about it, why not? I would brag like hell if I had the time and energy to stress test my seeds, to do different sort of trials on my seeds to make sure that what comes out of them is what I say I'm giving you. And if someone isn't doing that, then you got to pay extra special attention to those plants. And that's another reason that you want to go with a reputable breeder. And even reputable breeders, you're going to sometimes get hermaphrodites, because a lot of these really, really good varieties come with a suite of problematic issues like hermaphrodism. It doesn't mean that they're bad, but good growers will at least tell you to look for them. Look for male flowers. Don't overfeed these. Don't let these go dry, because we've tested them and we found out that this is one of the reasons that you're going to have problems with our stuff. So you want to get back again, full circle back to your genetics are important, but even if you buy the best genetics in the world, you can't just fire and forget. You can't just plant your herb and walk away. You really need to pay attention to what's going on there. So well, Nate. So Nate's talking about make that compost tea with down to earth neem seed fertilizer. I haven't had bugs, and my 4 dogs come and go. I'm not saying this is why I have no bugs, but I have no bugs. But that's like, I would never say I don't have bugs. I would always say I have bugs that I haven't seen yet. If I'm if I'm using predators, if I'm using if I'm really confident about my IPM, because I know that I'm doing something to prevent them other than every once in a while making a tea, I would say that. But if I were you, I would say I haven't seen the bugs that I have yet, and they haven't become a problem. You don't want to say I don't have bugs, because the second you say that, you have bugs. Trust me. Um, and some people get lucky. Maybe you've got uh, native predators in your area. Maybe you have pirate bugs, or what are those the little rove beetles? Maybe you have hypoaspis, or what are those, stereolalaps semitis? Maybe those came in your soil, and so those are helping to control these numbers. But the problem with an indoor grow is that it is basically a perfect environment for some sort of pest. If you're following the vapor deficit charts, you are keeping your humidity above 60%. So you're pretty much never going to have to worry about spider mites. But, broad mites love that shit. They love it. Give them the moisture. They're into it. I don't think that russet mites are slowed down by moisture all that much either. And then you also start to see your different molds come in when you have too much humidity and everything. So implement an integrated pest management regimen. Figure it out, implement it. And, it's trial and error for everyone, because there isn't a lot of great research on this. But, there's lots of big farms that are doing very well by making sure that, like clockwork, every crop gets the same pest management situation. And sort of a side note to this, if you have a clone, you have a phenotype or a clone, um, and you love it, but it keeps getting problems, it keeps getting mold, it keeps getting pests. I don't know. Get rid of it. Get a different phenotype. Do something different. There are some plants that just attract bugs. There are some plants that just attract molds and funguses. It's just the sad truth of a world where we have bred plants for the drug qualities and not for the growing qualities. So we're getting more people who are starting to do more testing, but there's very few breeders that have a room full of spider mites that they're like, oh yeah, that's my spider mite room, that's where I put all my plants and find out if they have spider mite resistance. That's my russet mite room. I've got, because you don't want to have a room full of russet mites in your facility. So how can you actually test to see if these things are resistant? It's all sort of anecdotal. So there's a lot to it. By having an integrated pest management system that is regular, and say you're doing something regularly and you still get bugs, well, then you need to change something that you're doing regularly, But like, more often than not, what happens is people get cocky or lazy, one of the two, and then all of a sudden they're dealing with a problem that will destroy an entire crop. Broad mites will take an entire crop. Russet mites will, they don't kill the crop, they eat the external metabolites and stunt the growth. And you get a bunch of really crappy buds in the end with almost no weight. So you don't want to deal with that. Act like you have bugs today, and treat your plants like that. Cleanliness, schedule, stick to it, clean your plants out. You'll get it. All right. Well, cheers. I was going to talk a little bit about cannabis history. Um, there's a lot of information that isn't good, and there's a lot of information that's good. And anytime I want to talk about cannabis history, I have to look things up on the internet, and then I see these things on the internet, and I'm like, oh yeah, this is why I don't look up things on the internet about cannabis history, because there's a lot of information out there, and some of it's true, and some of it is not. So the Chem Dog, never DAWG, Chem Dog, DOG, 1991 Deer Creek Dead Show. A connection was made between a guy who now calls him Chem Dog Glass, but I don't know if he had that name. It just gets so confusing. I don't know if he had that name then. I heard that there's this stuff called Dog Bud that they said tasted chemi. And it started getting called Chem Weed or Dog Bud, and then they decided to call it Chem Dog. I don't know if you've ever had this herb, but it is fire. It is really fire. ChemDog has ChemD as so there's ChemDog, there's ChemD, which ChemDog I think sometimes is called Chem 91. There's Chem 4 and there's Chem Sister, all from the same set of bag seed that, originally I heard it came from the 91 Deer Creek um, show where a guy bought a bag and these seeds came in it. But then I heard that he made a connection there and then got a couple ounces in the mail or something later, and he got 7 seeds or something out of it or whatever. So it's a bag seed. This is something we do know. It was meaning that it was likely a self back cross, isolated hermaphrodite self back cross, or there was another isolated hermaphrodite plant in that grow room that crossed with it. This is where it just gets confusing. But ChemDog, fantastic herb, one of the original sort of chemi-gassy, high THC strains, really knocks you on your ass. But never DAWG. I know that there's some people that do that, and I don't know why. I guess because they're like from the streets or whatever. Who knows? Very interesting strain. If you get a chance to grow it, you're going to be very disappointed. It's hard to grow. It is. I had a Chem D cut. It, I did all right with it, but it failed to clone. And my buddy took the clones and he took them to his house. He's like, I have 100% clone rate. And I took like 4 clones on the side just because, and I just sort of tossed on, it wasn't, I don't know. That was a bad scene for me at that time. Sometimes I've had amazing success with clones. Right then I was going through, there must have been some kind of microbe or something that I was not handling right, because he's like, oh, my clones died. Did you take any clones of that cam? And I'm like, yeah, I totally did, and then it was down to 2, then it was down to 1. It had 1 little root and it died. And man, I was mad at myself because that is fire weed, but it does not like to grow. You have to really, you have to do it right. And so that segues me into like OG, what we call OG. OG is like the most confusing 2 letters in all of cannabis, because so OG originally in the late 80s, OG meant original gangster. Ice-T had an album called OG, Original Gangster. You would hear that in some of the rap area and everything, OG, Original Gangster. And then in Northwest Washington, where I was in the early 90s, OG meant organic. And then there was always a little bit of bleed over of also meaning original. So you would say, oh, that guy's an OG. Well, that didn't mean he was organic. That means he was original, like an original gangster. But then also herb could be organic. So then when you had an original organic strain and they called it OG, you didn't know what it meant. You're just like, you went with the OG. Okay, we're good. Yeah, OG. And so then there was, I think, basically late 90s, mid 2000s, there was a group growing herb near, I think, the Mendocino coast, ocean grown, OG. And this is something like when you see dog walker OG, or you see some of the, like the OG structure is these ocean grown guys. And what I would say OG structure is a finicky plant that grows pretty fast, pretty much triples when it flowers in size, tends to set pretty heavy buds out on the ends of its branches, and has a high THC content, lots of terpenes and such. It's really good bud, but also very not easy to grow, sort of like ChemDog. So then complicating this, there's OG Kush, and OG Kush, some say, is a offspring of the ChemDog. That just seems too convenient to me, but maybe it is. Maybe there was only one group of good genetics on the East Coast in the 90s or whatever. But OG Kush grows compact. Now that I'm thinking about it, it does sort of grow like ChemDog. But the compact version of ChemDog. OG Kush does not stretch super long and get set big buds at the end of long sticks like the ocean grown structure. OG Kush is much more of a Kush. Um, it's much more of the like an Afghanica, much closer, compact. Um, but sort of similar buds. Like that's where it's weird. The Chem Dog and the OG Kush do have sort of similar buds because really good Afghanica is kind of all a little bit similar. I'm not sure. So Steven's asking if we can mix the sativa indica mythos in this discussion too. Yes, I would say that like ocean grown bud is where you get a really, really strong hybrid of indica and sativa. Um, we talk about indicas and sativas um, mostly from effect, and then also, I guess you'll hear me say Afghanica because indica is like kind of an overarching term, and Afghanica would be the plants that grow like Afghanis. But the funny thing about Afghani plants is that um, there's a lot of um, variation because Afghanistan is not. There's a lot of different parts of Afghanistan. There's desert, there's high mountains, there's kind of temperate regions, and so even that's kind of a little bit of a misnomer. I'm realizing, but I guess that we use these terms because when you smoke some herb that makes you feel giddy and excited and like cleaning the house, we call it sativa. And if you smoke some herb and it makes you feel couch locked and blasted, we call it indica. And these days, it's very rare to find a pure version of either. Sometimes you kind of do like this is Afghani, and even that it's like well, but I get an up high at the beginning and then it fall this and that. Um, I guess that we really search for ways that we can group things as humans, and so it's hard for me to say it's wrong that we discuss things in this way because otherwise we'd have to be constantly really explaining everything, like absolutely explaining everything. Well, it's got kind of one of those up highs at the beginning, but then you get really hungry and the fear comes a little bit, but then you get really couch locked and it's like, wow, that's a lot of words. So, I don't know. There's the guy that said that we've called it wrong because sativa is the name for um, wild cannabis, and Afghanica should be the name for what we tend to smoke and breed because most of the stuff we have has been crossed into or crossed with Afghanis because those just are the best drug strains. Um, it's I don't have a lot of really good answers when it comes to all of this. I'm just kind of trying to tell you what I know about it and open the conversation a little more. All right, so Steven says, here we go. Let's see. I understood it had to do more with the growth pattern or whether or not it bushed out and stayed compact or if it stretched and got spindly, but the community talks about sativas energetic, indicas sleepy. Like, that's a bunch of BS to me personally. Well, yeah, I mean, when I think of a true sativa, I think of something that grows much closer to hemp. And when I think of an indica or an Afghanica, I think of something that grows short and compact, oftentimes dark colors. Sativas are going to be light lime green. Sativas are going to grow very fast and very tall. They're going to have long seasons. The indicas are going to be short seasons. They're going to be covered with resin, whereas sativa may have almost no external metabolites present, even though it might have 33% THC or whatever. Um, yeah, it's just it. The problem is that we've crossed and back crossed and out crossed, and Uncle Tony had this one special thing that he got from a seed from a bag in 1983, and we have no idea what it was, and he just keeps back crossing that, and this is what we're smoking now. Um, yeah, it's hard to have any real. It's a discussion. This is really one of those discussions that would probably be done better without me talking to you with us all talking about it, because aside from the fact that OG is the most confusing term in the history of herb, there's a lot of nuances to all of this. And so um, I think that you've got your indica, you got your sativa, you have your ruderalis, and that's what we're using these days. Um, Even to the point with OG, sometimes people call plants OG. Like you'll see, I use a Skywalker in my Last Jedi San. And I called it Last Jedi San because I looked up on the internet when I was thinking of using the word Last Jedi, because it was Skywalker times Lost in Space. And this is right around the time that Star Wars movie was coming out, The Last Jedi. And so I'm like, oh, I gotta call this The Last Jedi. But I looked up on the internet and someone already had that. I could easily find a variety named The Last Jedi. So I added San at the end, like the Japanese honorific, just to differentiate it. So that if someone were to be like, oh, do you have The Last Jedi? And you can be like, The Last Jedi or The Last Jedi San. I know it's nerdy, but it's what I did to try to differentiate it. With OG, I have seen people who add the word OG at the end of a plant because they've crossed it with OG Kush. And then I've also seen plants called OG because they have that ocean grown structure. So how confusing is that? Like, we can't even say that if it says OG on the end that it's been crossed with OG Kush. And we don't even know what OG Kush is, because there's a lot of like sort of mystery surrounding what it is. The guy said it's bag seed is what it is. It's bag seed. And bag seed seems to be some of our most cherished varieties come from bag seed, which means that plants self-crossing themselves with limited numbers of flowers might be the way to create the highest quality cannabis. Or maybe that was true before there was actually people breeding and working and really working at it. I don't know. There's a lot. There's a lot to it all. This is kind of one of the things that keeps me in cannabis all the time. It makes me happy to be involved with cannabis because there's always more to learn. There's always, don't get too set in the ways that you think you know something. Um, you know, I feel like I know a certain amount, but I'm always learning, and I'm always finding out that I was wrong about something I was sure about. And but don't be afraid to explore this knowledge and to look it up and to, I wouldn't, we have this thing over here, the Nate, they have Spliff Busters series, Leaf Buyer. Never heard of Leaf Buyer, never heard of Spliff Busters. Says the truth about OG Kush. Um, I'm not saying that it's right or wrong, but I'm saying that you have to take it all with a grain of salt, amalgamate as many sources as you can, and realize that part of the beauty of cannabis is that it's kind of built out of myths, and it's not so linear. And we still aren't 100% sure about a lot of things, and even the things we're pretty sure about, there's probably more to the story. So let's see, we got 4 minutes till my homie comes on after this. So I think I'm going to wrap it up here in a second. I want to say that I really appreciate you all listening to me babble. I really want to look for a way that we can have more of a conversation. A couple people commenting I like, but I really like to be a little more, a little more interactive. I'm searching for ways to do that. I said I was going to make a podcast. Yeah, like I have time to do that, or like I have the motivation to do that. I need to, right? But the bottom line is I really appreciate everyone that comes out to check this out. Again, I encourage you to text me, to post whatever, to, if I said something that pisses you off, you let me know. I really appreciate that you all take the time to be here. And, one of these days I might be growing weed again sometime soon. Who knows? Like, Kansas might even get a legal bill at the 49th state to legalize. That's how we do in Kansas. Anyway, Well, I thank you all for being here. I'm going to sign off now, but I hope that you keep a beginner's mind. Always keep an open mind. Make sure you have an IPM plan and you're following it. Make sure you're using your eyes. Make sure that you're having fun with it. And if you're not, reach out to people like me or anyone else that you know that might have been doing this, and talk to them about it, because a lot of us have made those mistakes that you've made. I've made crazy mistakes. I've been an idiot. Sometimes I might sound sort of harsh, but it's probably because I'm kind of talking to myself, honestly. So um, that's that. I appreciate you all very much. Much love, and have a great Tuesday. Stick around for the next show. I'm not sure what he's talking about tonight. Of course, I'm complete slacker, and I didn't look into it, but he should have some interesting information. Probably a lot more substantive than my ramblings. But anyway, appreciate you all a lot. Have a good